You're listening to NGSC Sports Radio. Hear us live on ngscsports.com, where you can get awesome analysis for all things sport. Or check out our podcasts on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn, and much more. For our latest videos, head to NGSC Sports YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at NGSC Sports and like us on Facebook. NGSC Sports. We never stop.
My name is Darryl Wilson, and I'm a fantasy footballaholic. I am the host for this meeting. Welcome to Fantasy Football Addict Support Group. This is an open meeting of fantasy footballaholics. For all who care to, please join me in opening with a moment of silence for those who are sick and suffering, both in and out of their lineups, for the loss of the PPR bandit, Julian Edelman. Not a serenity prayer. Fantasy gods, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and the courage to change the sleepers and put them in my lineup, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will not mine be done. Amen. Fantasy Football Addict Support Group is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others recover from fantasy footballaholicism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to play fantasy football and have many teams. There are no dues or fees for Fantasy Football Addict membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. Fantasy Football Addict Support Group is not allied with any sect other than NGSC Sports. We're not allied with any denominations, politics, organization, or institution. And we do wish to engage in many controversies, but we don't endorse or oppose any other cause. Our primary purpose is to stay married and help other fantasy footballaholics achieve winning the Shiva. And joined with me today, usual, is my co-host, Rory Davis. Rory, as a fantasy footballaholic, man, just tell me, what your feeling is on the season right now. We're 10 games in, and pretty much in most leagues, you only have 3 games left in the season, man. So, how are your teams looking, man? Are you primed for a championship run or what?
Well, I tell you what, Luke's going to be receiving, man. What's up, big homie? I have 3 teams. 2 of my teams are 7-3, and my third team in my main league, they're 5-5. But in all 3 of those teams, man, I don't really feel that mojo, that championship mojo right now. I mean, we're in week 11, and at this stage of the season, big homie, you should know if you have what it takes to win a championship or not. So I look at my roster, and I'm thinking to myself, is this a championship team? And to be honest, right now the answer has to be no. I know it's crazy because, we're in the show every week giving support, helping each other. But, man, I don't know. I don't have that feeling right now. So I think I'm going to make the playoffs, barring a late season collapse. But as far as inside the playoffs, I don't know if I have, the ammunition that's required, to take the Shiva home. And since, the deadline already passed in Yahoo leagues, I don't know about ESPN and NFL.com leagues, but the Yahoo deadline passed last week, so there's no more trading for me. So the guys that I have right now, those are going to be my ride or die guys to the end. And if I get lucky, man, maybe. But, it's going to take a lot of luck, though.
What do you consider necessary ammunition to win a championship, though? What is the makeup of a championship team? Obviously, like you said, in our first show, you said you want to have explosive players. You know what I mean? Do your team lack explosive players? I know that can't be possible.
Well, my team has explosive players, but and it's a but. I've made some trades. You know this. I've made a lot of trades. And I may have traded away maybe 1 too many explosive players. But, I mean, a championship roster to me is when you look at each position, from top to bottom, from quarterback down to your very defense, you think, you know what, I can take on any team in this league on any given Sunday and have a chance at least for a win. If you look, you see guys like Antonio Brown, you see Nuke Hopkins, see Larry Fitzgerald, you see Devontae Freeman, you see Gronkowski, you see Tom Brady, you see all those guys, you know what? You're feeling pretty good. But if you're looking at guys like, Andy Dalton, like what I'm looking at right now, maybe your confidence is not that high. Because it could go either way, 50-50. You have Gary Barnidge. I mean, is he going to wilt? Is he going to wilt under Johnny Football, taking over? Those kind of things, Melo. So, I mean, if you can look at your team, like I just said, and you see studs throughout your lineup, maybe your bench is not great, but if your starting lineup is loaded with studs, you feel pretty good going up against anybody in your league.
And that's what we talked about last week, man. Is definitely having the studs on your team, and it's all about the starting lineup, and it's less about the depth that you have on your team. Like me personally, I find it the funniest thing is when I'm looking at games, I'm analyzing, and I lose by like 8 points or 9 points. It's funny because I always go down to the kicker and the defense, and somebody's kicker always ends up scoring like 17 points against me, or the defense has like 13 points. So I look at my kicker. My kicker has like 4.5 points, and my defense has like 8 points. Like, good. I try to put together the best team as possible, but do I need going forward to analyze the kicking matchups, better? Do I have to look at a team with the explosive offense, and if they play good defense, okay, this team is going to get in position a lot, but they might not get to the end zone, so they're going to kick some field goals. Like, that's what I'm going to have to start looking at. Early in the season, I had guys like Matt Bryant, and Matt Bryant lost me a lot of games because the Falcons were going down scoring touchdowns, but they'll just end up kicking extra points. And there's no middle ground. They either wouldn't get in position or they'll score a touchdown. And that pretty much pissed me off, man. So it may sound silly, man, but I think kickers and defenses are important. But enough for that mumbo jumbo, man. As we do every week, man, let's talk about let's do a quick Monday Night Football recap. And there pretty much isn't much to recap from last night's game, because last night was a real shit show, as I should say. I'm definitely going to have to put the expletive mark on this week's episode, man, because I just feel a certain type of way about guys like Andy Dalton. Man, Andy Dalton did good for the majority of the season, but the real Andy Dalton, reared his ugly head, and which means prime time Andy Dalton showed up. Primetime Andy Dalton is a real jerk. He had one primetime game early in the season when he played decent, and everybody thought he's above, he's past his primetime bug that he used to have. But no, primetime Andy Dalton showed up last night, and he played horrible. Yes, Tyler Eifert dropped a couple passes, but Andy Dalton played horrible. Their only takeaway from this game is Nick Hopkins is pretty much matchup proof, and he made an incredible catch, one-handed catch for a touchdown that made all the highlight shows. So it was good from a regular NFL fan perspective, and it was good for fantasy football perspective. Nobody in last night's game helped you out at all. And you know me, man. I live for Monday nights. I live for guys playing on Monday Night Football when I'm trailing so I can catch up. And I said it would be a great idea to have some people in this game. Because why? Houston defense has been horrible for the majority of this year. So having guys like A.J. Green and Tyler Eifert, I thought I'd be in a good position. But no, these guys gave me absolutely nothing. And Nick Hopkins pretty much is one of the most consistent wide receivers in the league. And we'll just talk about some consistencies later on in this episode. And do you have any takeaways from that game at all?
So I want to share my pain with our listeners, because I would say my main league, my home league, whether it's you have all your family and friends, whether it's your home is, you have one league that you care about the most, whether it's the most money. Whatever it is, that's your main league or your league of record. Anyway, I traded for Andy Dalton just this past week. I never liked Andy Dalton, but I thought, this late in the year, week 10, surely he has turned over a new leaf. And no, he's actually a good quarterback. That's what I thought. So I traded away. I mean, don't laugh now, but I traded away Jay Cutler and Larry Fitzgerald, and I got Andy Dalton and Dante Moncrief. And you'd be like, oh, why would he do that? Why would he? Yeah, because I'm silly. That's why. That's why, because I'm stupid. So I thought Andy Dalton, he turned the corner. He's going to be a good quarterback. But, man, that was a horror show last night. I mean, the throws were not even close. And for the most of this Monday night game, I had had some adult beverage. I was like, man, what did I do? Because Andy Dalton, man, he just showed up like, here I am. For 10 weeks, he built a reputation of being, I would say borderline elite. But it just took one game. It just took one game before all of that hard work for 10 weeks was just erased. Because all of a sudden, you look at the schedule, it's like, oh, wow, you play Arizona next week in Arizona on Sunday Night Football. Then you play Pittsburgh, Cleveland. You're like, here we go again. So, I mean, sometimes I get it right with the trades, and I pick up a good player, with a sneaky kind of deal. But this time, man, I'm not so sure, man. If I don't want to, who I got job this time.
Oh man, watching the game, I actually only saw the second half of the game, most of the second half, and that's the only time that they had any real action was that touchdown. But I was watching the game in traffic on GameCast, and every time I saw, I read a comment, what I pictured in my head is, have you ever seen that crying Michael Jordan? I mean, the Michael Jordan meme, where they have Michael Jordan's face and he's crying, and he just put on everybody's face when they're doing bad. That's what I saw last night. I kept on picturing Andy Dalton with that crying Michael Jordan face. It's just terrible. Like you said, man, it only takes 1 week. It only takes one time to let the good times roll and get on, man. All right, man. So, I feel for you when it comes to that. So a little bit of injury news. Let's just clean it up. Julian Edelman, as I mentioned in the opening, Julian Edelman is going to be lost pretty much for the fantasy football season. There's, word that he might come back for the postseason, the real NFL postseason, but not fantasy. And a lot of people depend on Julian Edelman, and I feel for you if you lost it. So I hope your team is stacked, But how are we going to replace Julian Edelman, Rory?
I mean, right away, like they say in the NFL, next man up. Next man up. And the next man up is Danny Amendola. I mean, not because he's white, man. I know a lot of people like to compare, every white player to the next white player. In this case, not because he's white, all right? It's because he's actually almost the same build and almost the same skill set. He's a little bit slower, but he has sure hands. He's about 5'9", so a little bit, similar in build and what they're going to be doing. So, I mean, the number one, absolutely top waiver wire addition this week has to be Amendola, unless you just completely stack the receiver. I mean, even if you are, he's still a good guy to have, going towards the fantasy playoffs. And, we always talk about trust. Can he be trusted? I mean, it's more about Brady. We all know Brady can be trusted. So, obviously, he plays on the number one offense in the NFL. If you're playing with Brady and you're playing, let's say 70 to 80% of the snaps, you're going to be in that circle of trust. And if you have a high waiver claim or a lot of fab, go ahead and take the plunge. Get Amendola in your lineup.
That sounds good, man. I don't think there's many leagues in that Amendola is available. Maybe you could play one of those 10-team leagues he's available. I personally play in 8 leagues, and he is available in 2 of those 8 leagues. I definitely checked it out last night. And the thing about Amendola is, if you have a receiver on the Patriots team, he should definitely be owned already. And that's not a knock on anybody because we all know how explosive this Patriots team is. Amendola should already be owned in all leagues. There isn't any league, especially PPR leagues, where he should be on the waiver wire. And it's a funny thing about Amendola. I agree with you in one sense, like, okay, yeah, he plays with Brady. But when you talk about trust, I don't think you can really trust Amendola. If we remember, Amendola played with the Rams, and he was an explosive PPR bandit. I had him a couple of years. And, when he played, like, he racked up catches and yards and blah, blah, blah. But next thing you know, he has a collarbone injury, or he has this injury or that injury. Since he's been with the Patriots, it's been pretty much the same thing. When Wes Welker left the Patriots, people forget that Edelman was just like a grunt player, some guy that did grunt work on special teams. Amendola was that guy that was supposed to replace Wes Welker, and they made a big splash in free agency. Like, oh, we have somebody that's better than Welker who actually, has been doing this for some time, but he's been getting hurt. But as far as fit goes, of course, Amendola's going to be an absolute PPR monster. We saw that already in the most recent games where he's been balling his ass off. So he's going to see a lot more targets. The only thing I worry about is when is the ball going to drop with his injury, So definitely who benefits from this is Brandon LaFell. Brandon LaFell should see some more targets. Amendola's going to eat. Gronk is going to eat. Hopefully they could get the ball to James White because, like I mentioned last week or a couple weeks ago, White, really isn't, a big part of that offense. And I've been watching him for a long time. For some reason, I don't know how come they don't include him in the offense. And one name to keep an eye on, man, is the guy that they signed on the offseason, Keyshawn Martin, who has speed to burn, who used to be just like a kick return specialist. He has speed to burn. Tom Brady said they're going to try to get him some work. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. If you have room to stash, maybe stash it, but he wouldn't be somebody that I would chase on a waiver wire. So next guy to look at would be Allen Hurns. Allen Hurns, man, he's my guy, and he's been playing through all kinds of injuries this season. He scored a touchdown pretty much in 8 consecutive games played or something. Nobody else in the league has done that. But specifically, he's dealing with the sports hernia injury right now, and I thought it was going to be curtains for him, but it does not surprise me at all, the revelation that I saw today that he plans to play on Thursday night, with the sports hernia. If he's going to play, go ahead and plug him in your lineup because I have much respect for this guy. He's a man, and he's not going to look bad when he plays. So if he says he's going to play, he's going to play. He's going to be good, and he won't hinder your team.
Hey, let me add something to that. I mean, not only is he going to play, but from what I read earlier, they said he was practicing in full. So that means he has pretty much no limitations on what he can do. So I think the sports hernia is something that they're going to put off till the end of the season.
Right. So,
and, the Amendola injury, he already had it. He was already playing hurt, with multiple injuries. So I don't think it's, any kind of concern about, what he's dealing with. Like you said, just plug him in as he normally would. He's, it's pretty much, high wide receiver 2 right now. And, he's pretty much a lock to score a touchdown again. You always think, when is it going to end? But it hasn't ended yet. So, just keep on riding the wave, ride it till it ends.
Right. The only thing that that would concern me is not his injury, but Tennessee's defense isn't a pushover. Especially since Malarkey's been there. They've been playing a lot better defense over these past couple of weeks. So if you have somebody comparable, and I hate playing wide receivers on Thursday Night Football. I just really do. Defenses are always ready on Thursday Night Football. If you have somebody comparable to go against you could play over Hurns, I would probably play somebody else over Hurns. That's if you have a real, if you have a legitimate guy where it's a question to put him in and not just some bum, But if Hurns happens to not play for some reason, I think Marcus Lee will be the next man up, and he played this past week, and he was pretty decent. Another injured wide receiver, Malcolm Floyd. It's pretty crazy that this guy is going to continue to play with a partially torn labrum. I don't know how effective he's going to be. I don't know how he's going to affect Phillip Rivers' play. What do you think about Malcolm Floyd for the Chargers?
Well, that's interesting because I've heard conflicting reports about his availability. So I'm not really sure because what I heard is that he's not going to play again for the remainder of this season.
Right.
Yeah. You're over there in the West Coast. I'm over here in the East Coast. So maybe you heard something, closer or more, recent than what I heard. But last I heard, he's done for the year. And, it's just about, is he going to play next year or is he going to retire? He's 35 years old, had a nice career in the NFL. So, pretty much as far as the Chargers go, it's all about Stevie Johnson and Dontrell Inman right now, Antonio Gates. Even if Floyd does play, I wouldn't expect too much. I wouldn't expect too much from Floyd. He's a one-trick pony. He's a deep threat. He's a big play guy. And if he doesn't catch a bomb, then he's probably not going to do much for you. And, as we talked about earlier in the show, circle of trust, guys you can trust and guys you can depend on. Malcolm Floyd doesn't fall in that category. So, even if he plays, I wouldn't be starting him anyway. So, much respect to him, had a nice career. If he doesn't play again, it was great to watch him play in all of you in San Diego, big receiver. But, Father Time, man, it always gets you in the end.
Except for the caveat that this is the last week of buys in the NFL, so some people probably need somebody to play. That's the only reason I say look at Malcolm Floyd this week. And according to Ian Rappaport, he said Malcolm Floyd is going to rehab his injury. He's going to rehab and attempt to play through his torn labrum for the remainder of the season. Everybody knows this was supposed to be his last season, and Antonio Gates is saying, he's trying to get him to come back for one more season. So it'll be interesting to watch. Let's keep an eye on the reports of Malcolm Floyd. And since we're talking about Floyd, Rory, a couple weeks ago, you and I had a conversation. About guys, you want to pick up or who should be picked up, blah, 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 blah. And then we talked about Michael Floyd. Well, I talked about Michael Floyd, and he should be a guy that you pick up regardless. And you didn't agree. Since that conversation, man, this guy has continued to perform at a high level, and he's somebody that Carson Palmer seems to really trust, and he's been getting those targets, man. He's been getting those targets. So the past 4 games, he has 5 touchdowns, 8 targets in one game, 4, 8, and 9 targets in the last 2 games. He has over 100 yards, man. What's your take on Michael Floyd?
The interesting thing about his reemergence is that it coincided with John Brown getting hurt. So I'm not sure what to really expect or what to really think. Because, Coach Arians came out and said that Michael Floyd is actually ahead of John Brown on the depth chart. So right. I'm not sure how much of that is actually coach speak or if that's actually the case. So I think it's a little suspicious, a little fishy that Michael Floyd, his big, breakout campaign started as soon as John Brown got hurt. So if John Brown can get healthy again this year, which is in doubt because we don't know, I really don't think that Michael Floyd will continue his recent dominance. I'm not against his production though. I'm not against him because he's beasting right now. So if you have him, good for you. I hopefully he keeps it up. I just want to put a warning out there that John Brown, man, he's something else. He's a whole nother level of speed. And, John Brown, man, I've always liked John Brown. He's a really, really serious deep threat. His speed, his route running, his hands, his jump is out of this, planet. So
and
I know he's
and he could dance.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget that he's a great dancer, too, right? So, if he gets healthy going down the stretch, man, he could, come back and take away some of those targets, But Fitzgerald, he'd always be Mr. Consistent. He'd always be the underneath guy. He'd always be that position receiver. But as far as the deep threat, those deep bombs from Carson Palmer may be divided between John Brown and Michael Floyd going forward. That's all I want to say about that.
I don't agree. I'm just going to continue with the same thing that I had told you a couple weeks ago. I don't think it's a either or type of situation. the way this offense runs and Bruce Arians runs, there is enough balls to go around for everybody. And I think it's even better for everybody when John Brown is healthy. John Brown will eat, but Michael Floyd will be even more open as well. And he will get a lot of the red zone targets like he's been getting last week. Last year, he was supposed to do last year what he's doing right now, had not been for the slight hurt foot and Carson Palmer getting injured. You know, I wasn't going to mention this on this show because, you know, all I like to talk about is fantasy football. But I just talked about a guy dancing. And, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there, man. And Cam Newton, do whatever the F you want to do. Forget what all these other people are saying. Dance, get your party on, and score those fantasy football points, brother. I'm all for you dancing and making our fantasy football teams look good. We talked about him early in the year, and, you know, man, I just want to – if anybody knows Cam Newton, I want to extend an apology to Cam Newton for even doubting him early in the season like I was doubting him. You're not going to have a mega 30-point game every week, but you talk about circle of trust. Cam Newton has a very high floor, and he's not gonna give you a dud due to all those rushing yards that he has. So I'm cheering for Cam because his playoff schedule looks real tasty. Does not have one single tough defense on it for the rest of the season, except for the resurgent Washington Redskins defense this upcoming week. So Cam, salute. I hope you guys go 16-0, and I hope you go ahead and hoist the Lombardi Trophy right now. If my Raiders can't do it, I hope you could do it. And speaking of my Raiders had an interesting game this past week. Some of the wide receivers didn't live up to expectations in this football game, like many people thought they would. Andre Holmes scored a touchdown. The tight end scored a touchdown. Did Amari Cooper score a touchdown? Did Michael Crabtree score a touchdown? And yeah, Derek Carr, DC4, had a nice game, 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's good for him. But there wasn't a lot of passing going on in this game, man, except for the side of the Raiders. And I definitely thought that the one Stephon Diggs would eat the Raiders' porous secondary alive. But he did no such thing. Why are you feeling about Stephon Diggs, man? Because I looked at Stephon Diggs as a sure start pretty much every week. Now, is this like I know this is an Adrian Peterson show in Minnesota. Are they dumbing down the playbook because they're winning games and their defense is playing good? Or is he in the circle of trust?
Well, you know, first of all, Miller, you know, I never like to trust rookies. That's the first thing. I'm a big no rookie guy. Even though I do have Stephon Diggs on maybe one or two of my team. So he's getting there, but I wouldn't say he's there right now. But one thing about that game last week against the Raiders, there was like 20 to 30 miles per hour wind supposedly. I mean, it didn't really affect Derek Carr that much because he threw some long touchdowns in that game.
Right.
But Teddy Bridgewater was a little bit concerning to me. Maybe it was the Raiders' defense, but he was holding on to the ball a lot. I mean, he wasn't going through his reads or his progressions as quickly as I would like to see. So because of that, you know, I thought Stephon Diggs suffered because of that. So, I mean, going forward, I mean, this late in the year, if you're already starting Stephon Diggs, obviously you're going to keep on starting him because this is not the time of year to start trying on new guys. You know what I mean? Unless you can get Danny Amendola, which you don't really love that much, you know, you're not going to go ahead and start putting in, you know, some waiver wire guy just because, you know, you have a feeling. This late in the year, you got to go with the guy that brought you here, and you're going to ride him till you die. You know what I mean? Right until the end. Do or die. But Stephon Diggs, man, I'm just a teeny bit worried. But like I said, I've come too far now to turn back. So, you know, I'm going to just ride him till the end and hopefully, you know, take him to the promised land.
I hear that, man. And it doesn't hurt that they have a guy on their team by the name of Adrian Peterson who has just been showing his ass, you know. If you listen to the show called The Black Hole Brigade here on NGSC Sports, I talked in depth about of this Minnesota Vikings team and this Raiders matchup. And I said, people take Minnesota Vikings for lightly. In fantasy football, their defense isn't sexy by any means, but they're just solid. And they're going to give you a decent amount of points every week, but they're not going to help you win any games. They just won't lose any games for you in fantasy football. But Adrian Peterson, he showed up last week once again with his 200 yards and that long 80-yard run. So salute Adrian Peterson, man, a long-time fantasy football stalwart and a favorite of mine. And another long-time player and a favorite player of many people really shit the bed this past week. And I know there are some people out there that had him as a starting quarterback in their lineups. But if you are one of the people that seeks your therapy here in the Fantasy Football Addict Support Group weekly, you would have known to maybe even drop this guy or definitely have him on your bench. But there is no reason that anybody at all should have been starting Peyton Manning this past week. Nobody should have been starting Peyton Manning. We established the fact already that he isn't what he used to be. And definitely this offense was going into a winterization period. But not only did they go into a winterization period yesterday, he looked pretty damn terrible. He looked bad. If you didn't believe that he was done before, he had a nice little fluke game a few weeks ago in the comeback against Indy and Green Bay. He looked terrible. So he won't be playing this week due to plantar fasciitis, so he'll be out at least 1 week. And who knows if he's even going to come back for the rest of the season. Who knows? They might just sit him on the bench till the end of the season and bring him in for the playoffs. Who knows? But he has to heal. He just not look
you know
good.
what? Hey, big homie. I didn't mean to cut you off, brother. You know what? This kind of, we're both big Laker fans, and the Peyton Manning situation kind of, yeah, I'm going there, man. It kind of reminds me of the Kobe Bryant situation. Both of these guys have been great players their whole careers, and they're now on the back end of a really, decorated career. And it's kind of sad, man, to see, the great Peyton Manning struggling this much, whether it's due to injuries or, just straight out, ineffectiveness. It's kind of sad, He's been a great fantasy football, veteran for years, man. He's led the league in points scored many, many times. He's won many championships for a lot of fantasy football players. So, it's really the end of an era. But Osweiler, man, he's a prototype NFL quarterback. He's 6'7", maybe 6'8", I believe. He's a tall, big, strong guy. He has a nice, solid arm. And he showed good mobility on Sunday. So, I know it's late in the year to kind of actually trust somebody. But in a pinch, man, worst case, he has a great receiver and a great offense. There's still Emmanuel Sanders. There's still Demaryius Thomas. So maybe with these next 3 weeks, maybe he could earn our trust and, be somebody for the fantasy playoffs run. Now, I'm not saying this guy is going to be an automatic starter, but he is a speculative ad. You just never know. He could turn out to be somebody great. Because think about it, he's been sitting on the bench for like 3 years. He's watching the great Tim Tebow, and he's watched Peyton Manning. So maybe now it's his time to shine, just like Aaron Rodgers did a few years ago in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers was on the bench for 3 years. He watched Brett Favre, and when he came off the bench, the rest is history. So just keep an eye on Osweiler, man. He could be somebody to watch. I don't know.
And man, I'm glad you kept on talking because I was depressed for a second that you went there with that Kobe Bryant nonsense, man. I was really depressed.
Hey, we love Kobe, man. We love Kobe, dude.
I was really depressed that you went there, man. But you made a good point, man. It's an excellent comparison to Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying he's going to be Aaron Rodgers, but in a comparison that he sat behind the great for a couple of years. And Brock Osweiler was drafted, pretty high by the John Elway regime before making the whole Peyton Manning move and all those other things. So he's been in this organization for quite some time, and he actually looked pretty decent in the preseason. In the preseason, like when he was brought into the games, the second and third team was moving the ball and scoring touchdowns in the preseason. So it's not a bad look to have Brock Osweiler. I don't think he's trash at all, but people really, really don't know what he brings. But I would say once he entered the ball game this past week, that offense began to move. Yeah, was it garbage time? Yes, but no defense likes to give up points, and the Kansas City Chiefs didn't play prevent defense at all. I watched that game closely because I thought I was going to see some garbage points from C.J. Anderson or something, so I stayed watching that game. But Kansas City defense didn't give. Brock Osweiler played good. And looking at their schedule for the next upcoming weeks, it isn't a bad opportunity for points if he could play the next couple of weeks. Chicago has been playing well lately, that John Fox regime. But after they have New England, then you have San Diego, then you have Oakland, then you have Pittsburgh. You have 5 games on the up-and-coming schedule where Brock Osweiler could score points if he plays. And that's a big if because we don't know if Peyton Manning is going to come back or not. I'm expecting that he does come back in the next few weeks, but they should give him at least a week off. But knowing him, he's going to want to come back and face Tom Brady for one last time at home at that in Sunday Night Football. So who knows, man. But I wouldn't be worried about Brock Osweiler. I wouldn't be worried about Demaryius Thomas or Vernon Davis should get some love this week, man, because I'm not sure about Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders is gimpy. He didn't look good this past week, so I don't know if he's going to play or not. Another thing coming up, talking about guys starting and getting starts, Johnny Football, man. Johnny Football will be starting this week, and rightfully so for a trash Cleveland Browns team. Like they have to kick the tires on this guy and see what he's about the rest of the season. And thankfully for him that, he got his off-the-field issues cleared by the NFL today, and they won't suspend him. But I think Johnny Football is definitely good for Travis Benjamin. Travis Benjamin, is a favorite target of Johnny Football, So I, like an idiot, thought about that this past week, but I had Travis Benjamin on my bench, and I ended up losing because he outscored the guy who I had in for him, which is Deshaun Jackson. How do you score 45 points against the New Orleans Saints and Deshaun Jackson only had 2 catches for like 44 yards or something like that? That's ridiculous. Anyway, though, Travis Benjamin should take an uptick. I'm not sure how it affects Gary Barnidge. Gary Barnidge didn't look good this past week, but caught like a late garbage touchdown. So I don't know, man. Do you have any take on this?
I tell you what I like about Johnny Football's situation going forward. I mean, he has one goal, and that goal, let me just tell you what it's not. It is not to win football games, really. He said he wants to win football games, but me and you, we know that they're not going to win too many football games. But what this really is an audition for next year for him. So his only goal is to ball out. Right? But if you get Johnny Football, he's going to try to fill up that stat sheet. He's not caring about how many picks or what. He's just trying to score as many points as he can just to convince the hierarchy that, I can be that franchise quarterback. So you know what you're going to get? You're going to get a lot of passing attempts, a lot of rushing yards, and hopefully a lot of touchdowns. Because they don't care about the record. It's a lost season. They're planning for the draft already. They're planning for the future. So they're going to say, you know what, Johnny Football, you go out there, buddy, run around, throw the ball downfield to Travis Benjamin, and let's see what you can do. And that's what he's going to do. And, for fantasy football, that is a great situation to be in. Because maybe if it was a better team, maybe they want to try to run the ball to kill the clock, save throws. But in Cleveland, there's going to be none of that running the ball stuff, killing the clock stuff. Because they're going to be behind, and, they're going to be just throwing the ball all over the place. Now, Johnny Football, he almost had 400 yards last week against a good Pittsburgh secondary. So, I mean, there is some cause for, some excitement going forward. I mean, he's not guaranteed to throw for that much every week, but I like his ceiling and floor going forward, man. I think he's a viable guy, as we go towards the stretch. Like you say, you have 3 weeks to enter into that circle of trust. Hey, man, John football has been a rock star in fantasy, man, in the NFL. And no,
this is what I'm
he's going to get a chance.
That's what I'm telling you slow down about. Just
go ahead.
one. I agree with what you say. The only thing I'm telling you slow down is you said the good Pittsburgh secondary. Pittsburgh secondary has been trash. So let's just get that straight. That's a trash defense, and if you have a quarterback, you can score points against Pittsburgh defense.
No, so, Pittsburgh. You know what, man? I don't know the numbers though, big homie, but man, Pittsburgh defense. I thought they've been a decent defense all year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I thought they've been decent. For the most part of the year. I don't know if you have the numbers right there or not, but I mean they're decent. They're not elite.
Pittsburgh defense has been exploitable. They have been exploitable so far this year. If I have somebody I'm starting up against the Pittsburgh defense, and you're gonna make me look at the numbers right now. But besides that, they're on a bye this week. Cleveland Browns on a bye this week, and then the week coming off of the bye, they get the Baltimore Ravens, who are the worst team in the NFL when it comes to giving up fantasy football points. So the Pittsburgh defense is, pretty terrible. It's pretty much 29th against the pass.
Oh, okay. All right.
Football or something like that. So Pittsburgh is one of the worst. Is one of the worst defenses. But anyway, though, man. So, yeah, it's a lot of good takes on Johnny Football, man, because they're, like I said, they're going to throw. Like, they're not going to try to – they really don't have any running backs, so they know what they're going to get out of Duke Johnson, and they're going to pass in the ball. So, yeah, they're going to throw. I just don't know how much he likes to throw the Barnage. That's my only question. Another football player, another quarterback coming in, Nick Foles, got benched for Case Keenum. Not much to talk about anyway, except for – the one, Todd Gurley, who scored again this week, beast, against the Chicago Bears. But the thing to talk about, I mentioned Bears, is, the other rookie that played in the game, Jeremy Langford. And, I didn't expect Langford to put up any kind of good numbers at all this past week, but he did. And I think he's here to stay because, you know why? The Chicago Bears are actually in contention. Chicago Bears are in contention, definitely, man, and they are playing. They might have a chance at the playoffs. It's crazy. It's crazy that I say that. It's crazy that I say that they might have a chance at the playoffs, but they actually do. They are 4-5, and they are right on the outskirts. You know what I mean? They're pretty much right on the borderline of a wild card. And the way this kid has been performing, you have to give him a chance, even if Matt Forte comes back. Even if Matt Forte comes back, you have to give Langford a chance. And as we know, John Fox, man, John Fox likes to play multiple running backs if both those running backs are good. He has a history of it. So they win a few more games, and they have very winnable games coming up. So who knows, man? Who knows? What's your take on Langford?
I tell you what, he absolutely crushed me this week. I played against Langford, and he caused me to get blown out of the water because he had a monster game. He's a great talent. But we got to pump the brakes right here. I mean, Matt Forte is an NFL icon. He's a fantasy football legend, a Hall of Famer. And if he's healthy, he's going to be playing. The only problem is Langford has been playing so good, you have to give him some touches. So I don't think it's going to be a complete, a full-on running back by committee, but Langford is going to steal some touches, and especially those goal line touches, because he's a bigger back. So maybe 70-30, 60-40 going forward. If you're a Forte owner, that's the best you can hope for. But if you're a Langford owner, you hope Forte, takes his time coming back because he's a free agent next year, and he's probably thinking about his future. Like, you know what? Why should I risk getting re-injured and hurt my chances of getting a big contract to play in a lost season or potentially lost season. So, that's something to keep an eye on. If I had either of those guys, I'd be worried because I think they're going to do enough by themselves to hurt each other's value going forward.
I wouldn't be worried. I wouldn't be worried at all. They're solid. They're solid high-end RB2 value football. Like, there's enough to go around because they pretty much don't have much of a passing game except for throwing it to Alshon Jeffries, and both of these guys could catch the ball out of the backfield. We saw in that long catch and run by Langford, and Matt Forte has a history of catching balls. But Jay Cutler, man, Jay Cutler has been playing well, and you alluded a little bit to that earlier when you were mentioning your trade. Jay Cutler has been playing well over the last few games, fantasy football wise. What's your take on what's going on, man? Are you liking what you've seen out of Jay Cutler lately?
Well, you know what? We've been talking about circle of trust. We've been talking about circle of trust this whole show because we're close to the playoffs now. And, I traded him away, so I'm done. But he has had 5 weeks now. That's 5 weeks with over 20 points in fantasy football. Whatever league you're playing in, it's been over 20 points. And he just destroyed a great Rams defense, especially, in St. Louis. So Jay Cutler, man, hats off, man. I know a lot of Bears fans, they wanted to run him out of town if they could coming into the season. But it looks like now he might be the guy that could actually take him towards the playoffs. So, Jay Cutler, man, hey, hats off to you, brother. He's been one of my favorite guys, from his Denver days with his Brandon Marshall days in Denver. But, he's showing me something this year, Mello.
What's interesting about Jay Cutler, man, is, like you said, the last 5 games, it depends on what league that you're playing, pretty much the last 6 games, ever since the donut against the Seattle Seahawks where he really didn't play. He's been awesome. And the last 4 out of the last 5 games have been on the road. They've all been road games. So looking at their schedule coming up, this next game isn't very tasty against the Denver Broncos. But, like you said, he just destroyed a good Rams defense, and the Broncos defense got destroyed this past week by Kansas City. Who knows, man? Who knows what Jay Cutler could do? And it's a bye week. You might have a player on the bye. You might have Ben Roethlisberger on the bye. So who knows? Bring in Jay Cutler, and he might do good for you. Then they play against the reeling Green Bay Packers on the road, and that's one game where I would be worried about because he goes into Green Bay and plays horribly a lot of times. And they have the 49ers and the Redskins, and the Vikings, decent, and the Bucks in Detroit. So here's a pretty decent schedule going forward, man. So if Jay Cutler for some reason is available on your waiver wire, go ahead and pick him up, man. And talking about quarterbacks to pick up from your waiver wire, I have seen him out there. So if you're in need of quarterback help and you see the name Romo on the wire, because he does come back this week. We mentioned a couple weeks ago that Romo is on his way, so you should probably pick him up. It might be too late. Pick this guy up because what? The 2-7. I can't believe that's their record. I can't believe the Cowboys are 2-7, man. The 2-7 Cowboys actually have a slight chance of still making the playoffs. And their team, they have not been getting blown out of games at all. The Cowboys have not been getting blown out of games, so they are a decent team all around. But they just need their offense to kick up. And in that division, the Giants are winning the division at 5-5. Anybody can still win that division. So Cowboys go on a run, and I'm happy to see him coming back. As a McFadden owner, I'm happy to see him coming back because this offense opens up. They're not going to stack 8 players in the box for McFadden, and he's going to get loose a little bit. Des Bryant's going to get loose. Like, I'm not a Cowboy fan by any means, but I have their players in fantasy, and I'm just very, very excited that Tony Romo comes back. And Thanksgiving is coming up. He always balls on Thanksgiving. So, hey, man, like I could rejoice. I could rejoice a little bit looking at these guys. Yeah, what's your take on any of the Cowboys situation?
Hey, all the Cowboy fans, you better cover up your ears right now, man. The Cowboys are just an absolute joke, man, a disaster. These guys, they find a way to clutch defeat from the jaws of victory like every single week, man. Even with my Bucks last week, I just had a feeling that they would find a way to lose the game, and they did. So, I mean, even with Roma, the savior, he's coming in on a white horse, he's going to save everybody. I just like, you know what, who knows, man, because the Cowboys, man, they just so dysfunctional. And even though Roma's coming back, he's been up for 2 months, so maybe he's a little bit rusty, and he's still injury prone too. So I'm just trying to throw a little bit of cold water on the Roma fire. Hey, I agree.
Anything's better than Matt Castle and Brandon Wheaton.
He's definitely a big upgrade for, especially the biggest beneficiary would be Des Bryant, and of course his BFF Jason Witten. Those two guys are going to see the biggest uptick in their fantasy value. But I just wanted to just blow off some steam about the Cowboys just for a quick second, man. Jerry Jones and the whole organization, man, those guys, they have no clue about what it takes to run a successful NFL franchise. And, I'm just glad I'm not a Cowboys fan, because if I was, I might have to jump off to go to another team. But it's just fantasy football. It's not about real football. So, hey, man, Des Bryant and Jason Witten, the good times are about to start rolling right now, starting this week in Miami. Let the good times roll.
We're about to wrap up the show in a second, but there's something that I haven't spoken about that I'm going to give you the chance to talk about, and you're going to enjoy talking about it. I'm surprised that you haven't even brought this up yet. But one more last Cowboys news. The backup running back, Christian, whatever his mother wants to call him, has been cut today by the Cowboys. So the next man up, according to the depth charts I've looked at, is Rod Smith, who I know absolutely nothing about. Rod Smith. So that makes me feel better about McFadden. Let me find a piece of wood somewhere, man. I'm surprised McFadden hasn't been injured yet. So that's that. All right, man, before we close the show, there's a lot of stuff that we bring up every single week, and that sometimes we talk about it and sometimes we don't, but we always find a way to talk about some of these things. And some of these things have been the Jacksonville Jaguars and their wide receivers. Some of these things have been, Cam Newton, are some players for real or not? And we talked about that with Jeremy Langford this week. We did not, however, talk about Drew Brees, but he's on a bye this week, so whatever. We're not going to talk about Drew Brees right now. Who we are going to talk about is Dan Bradford. So, I'm really shocked. I'm really, really shocked, dude, that you did not bring up Sam Bradford this episode. And go ahead, man. What's going on? What's going on? He had a concussion, on a concussion protocol. Sanchez came into the game, and let's hear it, man.
Hey, I tell you what, man, I'm not gonna be the really bad guy to kick a guy when he's down because he's hurt right now. He has a concussion. He has the AC joint shoulder sprain. But look, man, we've talked about Sam Bradford all year, and give the franchise a full week of practice, man. And Mark Sanchez, there we go. Jordan Matthews owners, if you waited the whole year for Jordan Matthews to go off, well, congratulations, because here comes an actual NFL quarterback. The franchise is going to jumpstart Jordan Matthews, Zach Ertz, and, Darren Sproles. The whole Philly offense is going to just take off. I think Bradford, from this point on, is going to be now known as a career backup. I mean, some desperate team might give him another shot, maybe Cleveland. I'm not sure, but we can now safely rest any conversation about Bradford being an NFL starting quarterback because, as Dennis Green said, years ago, Sam Bradford, you are who we thought you were, and which is basically not good enough for the NFL, man. So, it was great. Thanks for coming. See you next time, buddy.
Who knows? He might still play this week, though. Who knows? So, thank you for tuning in to another therapy session of the Fantasy Football Addict Support Group as we try to help fantasy footballaholics work through their struggles 1 week at a time and help them win the championship. Hey, look, man, I'm just going to say this one last thing. If you have a team out of the playoffs, have some integrity and try to win every game still because there are other players in the league who are jockeying for position and who would like to make the playoffs. So don't be some pushover and rollover for a guy and be a free win. And don't, have a team that has injured players in your lineups, guys on bye weeks just because, you're feeling bad about yourself, about the team, and you don't care anymore. Oh, you have 17, blah, blah, blah. You're supposed to try to win every single week. That's why in a lot of leagues that I play in, I try to institute, an award. As a commissioner, if I have anything to say about it, there's a weekly award. There's definitely a weekly award for somebody who scores the highest points. So if you have a team that's actually 0-10, you still have a chance to win a prize. You might not make the playoffs, but you still have a chance to win a prize. Any last words, my man?
Here's what I say. First, good luck to everybody going down the fantasy, the home stretch. But I would say this, though. If you're out of the playoff, or you're in the bubble, or you think you cannot win the championship like me this year, look, man, it's never too early to start thinking about next year. You know what I mean? Hey, the scouting is continuous. It never ends. It never stops, man. So you look at those guys who are performing late in the year because those guys that perform late in the year are always more valuable to me anyway. How do you perform in November and December when you're really needed in those playoffs? So keep an eye out on guys who are performing at a high level and make a little note, if you can on your phone or whatever, which guy you really like right now. So next year when you draft, if a guy is, under the radar, you can say, I like this guy a lot because he's clutch and so forth. So even though you're out of it, there's still work to be done, for next year.
Find yourself a dynasty team. Find yourself a dynasty league. Every fantasy footballaholic should play in a dynasty league. Keeps you engaged year-round. And, I'm sorry to say, it keeps you having a fix. So it keeps that fix where you always have to think about your fantasy team because it's guys that you're attached to. You're not going to redraft them. You're attached to it. So that's it for this week. For my co-host, Rory Davis, it's your man, D. Will, a.k.a. Big Mills Mello, the host with the most, the sports fanatic, a.k.a. You follow me on Twitter, @SpitzGame. That's the first time this year that I've pretty much dropped all my aliases on you. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Fantasy Football Addict Support Group. Take care. God bless.